Chapter 16, Part 2 of Social Statics by Herbert Spencer. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 16, The Rights of Women, Part 2, Section 6. A future belief that subordination of sex is inequitable is clearly prophesied by the change civilization is working in men's sentiments. The arbitrary rule of one human being over another, no matter in what form it may appear, is fast getting recognized as essentially rude and brutal. In our day, the man of refined feeling does not like to play the despot over his fellow. He is disgusted if one in humble circumstances cringes to him. So far from wishing to elevate himself by depressing his poor and ignorant neighbors, he strives to put them at their ease in his presence, encourages them to behave in a less submissive and more self-respecting manner. He feels that a fellow man may be enslaved by imperious words and manners as well as by tyrannical deeds, and hence he avoids a dictatorial style of speech to those below him, even paid domestics to whose services he has obtained a right by contract. He does not like to address in a tone of authority. He seeks rather to disguise his character of master. To this end, wraps up his commands in the shape of requests, and continually employs the phrases, "if you please," and "thank you." In the conduct of the modern gentleman to his friend, we have additional signs of this growing respect for another's dignity. Everyone must have observed the carefulness with which those who are on terms of affectionate intimacy shun anything in the form of supremacy on either side, or endeavor to banish from remembrance by their behavior to each other whatever of supremacy there may exist. Who is there that has not witnessed the dilemma in which the wealthier of two such is sometimes placed between the wish to confer a benefit on the other and the fear that in so doing he may offend by assuming the attitude of a patron? And who is there that does not feel how destructive it would be of the sentiment subsisting between himself and his friend were he to play the master over his friend, or his friend to play the master over him? A further increase of this same refinement will show men that there is a fatal incongruity between the matrimonial servitude which our law recognizes and the relationship that ought to exist between husband and wife. Surely, if he who possesses any generosity of nature dislikes speaking to a hired domestic in a tone of authority, if he cannot bear assuming towards his friend the behavior of a superior, how utterly repugnant to him should it be to make himself ruler over one on whose behalf all his kindly sentiments are specially enlisted, one to whom he is bound by the strongest attachment that his nature is capable of, and for whose rights and dignity he ought to have the most active sympathy. Section 7. Command is a blight to the affections. Whatsoever of refinement, whatsoever of beauty, whatsoever of poetry there is in the passion that unites the sexes, withers up and dies in the cold atmosphere of authority. Native as they are to such widely separated regions of our nature, love and coercion cannot possibly flourish together. The one grows out of our best feelings, the other has its root in our worst. Love is sympathetic, coercion is callous. Love is gentle, coercion is harsh. Love is self-sacrificing, coercion is selfish. How then can they coexist? It is the property of the first to attract, whilst it is that of the last to repel, and conflicting as they thus do, it is the constant tendency of each to destroy the other. Let whoever thinks the two compatible imagine himself acting the master over his betrothed. Does he believe that he could do this without any injury to the subsisting relationship? Does he not know, rather, that a bad effect would be produced upon the feelings of both parties by the assumption of such an attitude? And confessing this, as he must, is he superstitious enough to suppose that the going through a form of words will render harmless that use of command which was previously hurtful? Of all the causes which conspire to produce the disappointment of those glowing hopes with which married life is usually entered upon, none is so potent as this supremacy of sex, this degradation of what should be a free and equal relationship into one of ruler and subject, this supplanting of the sway of affection by the sway of authority. Only as that condition of slavery to which women are condemned amongst barbarous nations is ameliorated does ideal love become possible, and only when that condition of slavery shall have been wholly abolished will ideal love attain fullness and permanence. The facts around us plainly indicate this. Wherever anything worth calling connubial happiness at present exists, we shall find that the subjugation of wife to husband is not enforced. Though perhaps still held in theory, it is practically repudiated. Section 8. There are many who think that authority and its ally, compulsion, are the sole agencies by which human beings can be controlled. Anarchy or government are, with them, the only conceivable alternatives. Believing in nothing but what they see, they cannot realize the possibility of a condition of things in which peace and order shall be maintained without force or the fear of force. By such as these, the doctrine that the reign of man over woman is wrong will no doubt be combated on the ground that the domestic relationship can only exist by the help of such supremacy. The impracticability of an equality of rights between the sexes will be urged by them in disproof of its rectitude. It will be argued that were they put upon a level, husband and wife would be forever in antagonism, that as, when their wishes clashed, each would possess a like claim to have his or her way, the matrimonial bond would daily be endangered by the jar of opposing wills, and that, involving as it would a perpetual conflict, such an arrangement of married life must necessarily be an erroneous one. A very superficial conclusion, this. It has been already pointed out that there must be an inconsistency between the perfect law and an imperfect state. The worse the condition of society, the more visionary must a true code of morality appear. The fact that any proposed principle of conduct is at once fully practicable requires no reformation of human nature for its complete realization is not a proof of its truth, is proof rather of its error. And conversely, a certain degree of incongruity between such a principle and humanity as we know it, though no proof of the correctness of that principle, is at any rate a fact in its favor. Hence, the allegation that mankind are not good enough to admit of the sexes living together harmoniously under the law of equal freedom in no way militates against the validity or sacredness of that law. But the never-ceasing process of adaptation will gradually remove this obstacle to domestic rectitude. Recognition of the moral law and an impulse to act up to it, going hand in hand, as we have seen that they must do, equality of rights in the married state will become possible as fast as there arises a perception of its justness. That selfish conflict of claims which, according to the foregoing objection, would reduce a union founded on the law of equal freedom to a condition of anarchy, presupposes a deficiency in those feelings with which a belief in the law of equal freedom originates, and would decrease with the growth of those feelings. As elsewhere shown, the same sentiment which leads us to maintain our own rights leads us, by its sympathetic excitement, to respect the rights of our neighbors. Other things being equal, the sense of justice to ourselves and the sense of justice to our fellow creatures bear a constant ratio to each other. A state in which everyone is jealous of his natural claims is not therefore a litigious state, because it is one in which there is, of necessity, a diminished tendency to aggression. Experience proves this, for as it cannot be denied that there is now a greater disposition amongst men towards the assertion of individual liberty than existed during the feudal ages, so neither can it be denied that there is now a less disposition amongst men to trespass against each other than was then exhibited. The two changes are coordinate, and must continue to be so. Hence, whenever society shall have become civilized enough to recognize the equality of rights between the sexes, when women shall have attained to a clear perception of what is due to them, and men to a nobility of feeling which shall make them concede to women the freedom which they themselves claim, humanity will have undergone such a modification as to render an equality of rights practicable. Married life under this ultimate state of things will not be characterized by perpetual squabbles, but by mutual concessions. Instead of a desire on the part of the husband to assert his claims to the uttermost, regardless of those of his wife, or on the part of the wife to do the like, there will be a watchful desire on both sides not to transgress. Neither will have to stand on the defensive, because each will be solicitous for the rights of the other. Not encroachment, but self-sacrifice will be the ruling principle. The struggle will not be which shall gain the mastery, but which shall give way. Committing a trespass will be the thing feared, and not the being trespassed against. And thus, instead of domestic discord, will come a higher harmony than any we yet know. There is nothing utopian in this. We may already trace the beginnings of it. An attitude like that described is not uncommonly maintained in the dealings of honorable men with each other. And if so, why should it not exist between the sexes? Here and there, indeed, may be found, even now, a wedded pair who preserve such a relationship. And what is at present the exception may one day be the rule. Section 9. The extension of the law of equal freedom to both sexes will doubtless be objected to on the ground that the political privileges exercised by men must thereby be ceded to women also. Of course they must. And why not? Is it that women are ignorant of state affairs? Why then, their opinions would be those of their husbands and brothers, and the practical effect would be merely that of giving each male elector 2 votes instead of 1. Is it that they might by and by become better informed, and might then begin to act independently? Why, in such case, they would be pretty much as competent to use their power with intelligence as the members of our present constituencies. We are told, however, that woman's mission is a domestic one, that her character and position do not admit of her taking a part in the decision of public questions, that politics are beyond her sphere. But this raises the question, who shall say what her sphere is? Amongst the Pawnees and Sioux, it is that of a beast of burden. She has to carry the baggage, to drag home fuel from the woods, and to do everything that is menial and laborious. In slave countries, it is within woman's sphere to work side by side with men, under the lash of the taskmaster. Clerkships, cashierships, and other responsible business situations are comprised in her sphere in modern France, whilst, on the other hand, the sphere of a Turkish or Egyptian lady extends scarcely an inch beyond the walls of the harem. Who now will tell us what woman's sphere really is? As the usages of mankind vary so much, let us hear how it is to be shown that the sphere we assign her is the true one, that the limits we have set to female activity are just the proper limits. Let us hear why on this one point of our social polity we are exactly right, whilst we are wrong on so many others. It is indeed said that the exercise of political power by women is repugnant to our sense of propriety, conflicts with our ideas of the feminine character, is altogether condemned by our feelings. Granted, but what then? The same plea has been urged in defense of 1,000 absurdities, and if valid in one case, is equally so in all others. Should a traveler in the East inquire of a Turk why women in his country conceal their faces, he would be told that for them to go unveiled would be considered indecent, would offend the feelings of the spectators. In Russia, female voices are never heard in church, women not being thought worthy to sing the praises of God in the presence of men, and the disregard of this regulation would be censured as an outrage upon public feeling. There was a time in France when men were so enamored of ignorance that a lady who pronounced any but the commonest words correctly was blushed for by her companions, a tolerable proof that people's feelings then blamed in a woman that literateness which it is now thought a disgrace for her to be without. In China, cramped feet are essential to female refinement, and so strong is the feeling in this matter that a Chinese will not believe that an English woman who walks naturally can be one of a superior class. It was once held unfeminine for a lady to write a book, and no doubt those who thought it so would have quoted feelings in support of their opinion. Yet, with facts like these on every hand, people assume that the enfranchisement of women cannot be right, because it is repugnant to their feelings. We have some feelings that are necessary and eternal. We have others that, being the results of custom, are changeable and evanescent. And there is no way of distinguishing those feelings which are natural from those which are conventional, except by an appeal to first principles. If a sentiment responds to some necessity of our condition, its dictates must be respected. If otherwise, if opposed to a necessity, instead of in harmony with one, we must regard that sentiment as the product of circumstances, of education, of habit, and consequently without weight. However much, therefore, the giving of political power to women may disagree with our notions of propriety, we must conclude that, being required by that first prerequisite to greatest happiness, the law of equal freedom, such a concession is unquestionably right and good. Section 10. Thus it has been shown that the rights of women must stand or fall with those of men, derived as they are from the same authority, involved in the same axiom, demonstrated by the same argument. That the law of equal freedom applies alike to both sexes has been further proved by the fact that any other hypothesis involves us in inextricable difficulties. The idea that the rights of women are not equal to those of men has been condemned as akin to the Eastern dogma that women have no souls. It has been argued that the position at present held by the weaker sex is, of necessity, a wrong one, seeing that the same selfishness which vitiates our political institutions must inevitably vitiate our domestic ones also. Subordination of females to males has been also repudiated, because it implies the use of command and thereby reveals its descent from barbarism. Proof has been given that the attitudes of mastery on the one side and submission on the other are essentially at variance with that refined sentiment which should subsist between husband and wife. The argument that married life would be impracticable under any other arrangement has been met by pointing out how the relationship of equality must become possible as fast as its justness is recognized. And lastly, it has been shown that the objections commonly raised against giving political power to women are founded on notions and prejudices that will not bear examination. End of Chapter 16, Part 2.